Lucas, this is a big episode. We've got a lot to talk about, and I got a feeling it's going to be a gay old time on this episode.
Will, I am rat old to my core that we're finally hitting such a milestone in terms of famous Arthur episodes. And we're listening, wedding listening. It's gay rat wedding time. Hashtag gay rat wedding. We're bringing it back. The media, the social media sensation, Will. Not since the Arthur Fist meme has maybe the illustrious television program Arthur caused such a stir. Maybe the end of the show was also a big deal, but this felt like a big deal.
This did feel like a big deal, and I'd say it is a big deal for many, many reasons that we'll be talking about on this episode of Elwood City Limits, the episodic Arthur podcast. My name's Will Young. My co-host is Lucas Mancini, and yeah, it's time. I'm sure people have been waiting years for this one, and they're going to have to wait just a little bit longer before we get into things. Because normally on this podcast, before we talk about an Arthur episode, whether it's the beginning of a season or a particularly notable episode, no matter what, we got a couple things to attend to first, especially considering that we have an email to answer in our mailbag, elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. And of course, for anybody who has been following along either on Patreon or otherwise, they've certainly known that we are going to be tackling this episode very soon. And this person, I am glad that they finally sent in an email. They never have before, but they are a listener of the show, and they are somebody who I think of a lot of times when I open the Elwood City Limits Instagram, because they are usually very active over there and appropriate, because I think this episode means a lot to them. The person I'm talking about is Marco, who emailed us to say hello. And here's what Marco has to say. Unlike most people, I care way too much about this episode, that being Mr. Ratburn and the special someone. Also, first time sending an email, so that's fun. Probably like a handful of people, I found out about the episode on Tumblr. Woke up one day and my dashboard was full of the news. Let's all be real. We knew Ratburn was gay anyways. I think the funniest thing of all is how nobody was surprised. A very nice day for all of us. Well, I don't know if I agree, but maybe could be that we weren't paying attention at the time. We're gonna get into that, I'm sure.
We're gonna get into this now. Will, I remember when this episode first came out, we did a special about the episode in question.
Yes.
I can't for the life of me remember, did we do an ECL flash forward where we talked about it, or did you talk about it with someone else?
I talked about,
because in watching it today, I felt a little bit surprised by some elements of it.
I watched it with a guest at the time. Somebody else who was very invested in it, and that's way back in the archives. You can check it out. But I also wanted to save you and I talking about it, because I guess even some years ago, I knew that we were going to get to it eventually. And here we are. I wanted to save that. I wanted it to be special when we got there. Back to Marco's email. How to respond to how this episode holds up today. Short answer, yes and no. For the time, it was good. We were only just starting to get gay relationships into cartoons, especially kids' cartoons. I think that this was a good beginning into better terms of how we still represent gay people in children's media. Making Ratburn not only a teacher, but a role model to the kids as gay, I think, was a good choice. These kids look up to and love Ratburn, and this doesn't change anything for how they view him. This episode even proves that the kids care about him so much that they would want to break up a relationship for him. But here's the thing. Patrick is not a character, in my opinion, but more of a concept. He feels like more of an extension onto Ratburn than his own character. This all goes back to the conversation of Arthur making characters for representation, but them being used for nothing. This is one main reason I'm so passionate about this, especially the few times when I spoke about it in the Elwood City Limits Patreon Discord. Sadly, I think the main problem was time. All they needed was more time. With such few seasons and episodes decreasing, there really wasn't much they could do with new characters. Patrick was just doomed since the beginning. You see people talk about how they're so happy for Ratburn, talking only about Ratburn. Then you question, where's the other guy? People don't even remember Patrick's name, even with watching the episode. He's just Mr. Ratburn's husband. Want somebody to remember him? It's not by name. He's just his husband and nothing else. He isn't even a main character in his own episode. It's honestly kind of sad. Yeah, we see him in the Thanksgiving special, but like, really? That's it? Since he's an adult character, I know we wouldn't see him often, but it's still sad, you know? If you want to get your hopes up of seeing him again, don't. Don't be like me, please. I don't want to make this email sad, so let me brighten it up. Thanks to this episode, it has taught me that even if you don't get what you want, you can make it yourself. Who cares what others say? If you want to make a difference, even if nobody cares, you can do it. Write that weird thing on your mind. Care about that background character. Just care. Whatever makes you happy, makes you happy. And of course, this is me speaking. Will, thank you for the email, Marco. Marco, one of the premier sources of Mr. Ratburn and Patrick fan art that I see a lot on our Elwood City Limits Instagram. I try to share them whenever I can. But Marco, thank you for your email, setting up a lot of stuff for us to talk about. That's going to inform our discussion, and it doesn't have to stop there, folks. If you're listening to this episode, of course, about the gay rat wedding episode, and you want to talk about how it made you feel at the time, how it makes you feel now, we would love for you to continue to submit that even as we go on along the Arthur timeline. ElwoodCityLimits@gmail.com is our email. Talk to us on social. Talk about it on our Discord if you are one of our patrons at patreon.com/ElwoodCityLimits. I'd like to add also, one thing about our Discord is that if you become a member of our Patreon and you get Discord access, but then you have to stop for whatever reason, I'll just keep you on the Discord. It's way too much work to figure out who is canceled. So
we don't kick people. No. It's a one-time payment of $1 if you want to get on the Discord.
Absolutely. So I know some of our patrons worry about that, or just like, I need to cancel for legitimate reason, but I don't want to lose access to the Discord. You won't. I'm too lazy. So please stay and have these conversations. Yeah.
That's only if you want to cancel due to a legitimate reason. If you want to cancel due to an illegitimate reason, for instance, you don't like us anymore, we're going to kick you off. You better fear for your Discord privileges. I'm just joking, of course. Again, anything that requires work vis-a-vis the Discord, it's not happening. It's a living, breathing organism unto itself. So rest easy. You have Discord privileges for life.
True that. As well, when you're a patron, you get access to all of our exclusive Patreon podcasts, as well as early access to ECL episodes like this one. The latest thing that you could have heard in full is our ECL Origins episode on Smiling Friends, the Adult Swim show that we both really enjoy, and we had a really good time talking about it. And speaking of which, very soon, end of July, we're going to be having our next episode of For the Kids, and we'll be talking about Bear in the Big Blue House, which is going to be completely new to me. So I'm going to be doing a lot of research and finding out stuff and actually watching the show for the first time. So join us as we find out more about this non-PBS Kids, but still important kids show at the end of July on patreon.com/ElwoodCityLimits. And we also want to make sure to thank some of those patrons who support us today. So thank you to Ross Ward, Christine Wong, Jake Bailey, Rachel Pearson, Ursula Cat, and Lawrence. Thank you to Aurora Borealis and Emmy the Ghost. Thank you, Jeffrey Norris. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Chloe and Maria Gisselquist. Thank you, Ryui, Thunder Yetta, and Alicia. Thank you, Jenna/Jen and Matthew Garcia. Thank you, CJ. And thank you, Tara. If it's been a while since you've heard your name, please let me know. I promise I'm not ignoring you on purpose. Okay, so the first thing to talk about with this episode is that this is a new season. Happy season premiere. This is Arthur season 22. So there's a few things to talk about in terms of what's changing around with Arthur. And I want, as always, to thank you to patron, as well as friend of the show, Peebs, for help with this research. So Arthur season 22, this is part of the final production order given to Oasis Animation for the show. Production of the final 4 seasons of Arthur went from early to late 2018. Oasis announced in June 2018 that it would produce 4 more seasons of Arthur. What we didn't know at that time is that it would be the last 4 seasons. This is, in fact, the shortest season of Arthur yet, only 4 episodes long.
We're below miniseries at this point. Now we're like what South Park does, where they don't even do a season of television. It's just the Arthur special. This is the gay rat wedding special.
So 4 episodes, can hardly believe it. I will add, though, of course, that they are making hour-long Arthur specials alongside of these, so those are also boosting it a little bit.
We have to set the precedent now, Will. Instead of doing the top 5, if there's only 4 episodes in the season, this might be... Well, I guess there's 2 in each, so it's really 8 episodes we're pulling from.
But perhaps we've got to switch to a...
Perhaps we got to switch to a top 3.
I've been holding that. It's just like, hey, if you listen to the latest season recap, I mean, spoilers, I didn't have 5 episodes in the last season that I liked, so it was my top 4. But we are busting it down to top 3 because we only have 8 stories to choose from in these 4 episodes. You're right, and we will be getting to those recaps a lot quicker now, too. Arthur Season 22 aired on PBS Kids from May 13th to May 16th, 2019. This isn't over a couple of months. This is over the course of 1 week. So you're getting all 4 new Arthur episodes in 1 week, and then you got to wait for the next season. Where were we in May 2019? This is usually a question that we ask, and that has ranged from, we were in various grades of school to we were working at the same place but weren't friends yet. In this week of 2019, May 2019, we were between episodes 97 and 98 of Elwood City Limits. We were just beginning season 7 of Arthur. Me personally, Lucas, May 2019, May 13th to May 16th, I was working at the parking company that I was working at for a few years, as well as doing some writing on the side. I still have that writing gig. I do not work at that parking company anymore.
2019, it's really a blur. You know, the pandemic really memory holds.
Yeah, it's true.
2019. I feel like I remember 2016 to 2017 way better than I remember, and I couldn't tell you a thing I was doing in 2019.
Well, if you do think of something, let me know. I know that if we are going to get to a season that came out during the pandemic, and we may have to revisit some not so pleasant memories of 2020 sooner rather than later. I will also note that this is between season 22 and 23. 2018 of November 2018, Bruce Dinsmore, friend of the show, great voice actor Bruce Dinsmore, tweeted that he had recorded his very last session of Arthur, and that's what began the snowball of is Arthur ending. But we're not talking about that here. I just wanted to note, before this season aired, there was already rumors that Arthur was ending. And I remember at the time being like, whatever. If it is ending, like, they'll say it's ending. And I kind of didn't believe it. I thought people were maybe reading too much into potentially a mistype or something. But we will get to that in a later season. And we have a couple of cast changes this time around. We have new voices for Arthur, DW, and Brain. So now voicing Arthur in season 22 is Roman Ludarotti, who also plays Arnold on the Magic School Bus Rides Again, which is the Netflix revival of the Magic School Bus, and also a voice actor on PJ Masks. We have Ethan Pugiotto as DW, who is also the voice of Charlie Brown. So we didn't really hear DW in this episode, heard her a little bit, but maybe think of Charlie Brown the next time you hear a DW line in this season going forward. And finally, we have Evan Blaylock as Brain. And that's season 22. We will, of course, have a lot more behind-the-scenes things coming a lot sooner than usual when we talk about the remaining seasons. And it starts off hot, this one. In case you couldn't tell, I've already said it several times, the episode we're starting with is Mr. Ratburn and the Special Someone. And yes, this was previously covered on the show with my special guest Viv on ECL Flash Forward. If you want to check that out, that was released June 7th, 2019, not even a month after this season aired. So the big thing about this episode, there's a few, before we actually talk about the episode itself, there's a few culturally relevant things to talk about. Notably, in case you couldn't tell, this is the first depiction of a gay relationship in Arthur. However, now hang on, before you Arthur heads start typing, There was an episode of Postcards from Buster, the spin-off show to Arthur, in 2005 that featured a lesbian couple, which caught some controversy at the time. PBS made the decision to remove the episode from its schedule, although other independent affiliate stations still aired it, because in 2005, it was considered quite controversial, especially on a public television kids cartoon, to have two parents of the same gender, as far as we know. And I'm glad to say that looking back on it nearly 20 years later, it's wild that people used to be concerned about this to the point where they could knock an episode off the air, or at least pressure PBS to take it off the air.
Right. Well, there was still pressure. Yeah, Mr. Ratburn and the special sub one, it was controversial when the Postcards from Buster episode dropped. Mm-hmm. But, the more things change, the more they stay the same. There was still controversy around Mr. Ratburn and the special someone.
This is true, but I just wanted to note this example because in 2005, it was very much, at least as I interpret it, people complained, well, then we'll just kind of take it off the air and never speak of it again. And it's really hard to track down
there's a distinction.
It's hard to track down that Postcards from Buster episode. Now, up front, most of the feedback about this Arthur episode, very positive. Multiple online news sources commented favorably about it. The episode got a GLAAD Media Award nomination, GLAAD being the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. However, there were notable exceptions from all of the avenues that you would expect in modern day, including the conservative organization 1 Million Moms, who created an online petition to remove the episode from rotation. And I just want to take a little victory lap and gladly say the episode is still widely available online and on PBS, and it was made into an episode of the Arthur podcast in 2023. So 1 Million Moms, I got 2 fingers for you. You can't see them, but I'm holding them up. And what fingers are those? Use your imagination, kids. But Lucas, to your point, public television affiliates in Alabama and Arkansas chose not to air the episode on its premiere date, and instead they ran a rerun. The director of programming for Alabama Public Television, Mike McKenzie, said that it didn't want to show the episode because children may watch the episode without their parents present, as might children who are younger than the intended age demographic for Arthur. Arkansas Educational Television Network did eventually air the episode later in the month and into June, but they aired it in the evening, overnight, and early morning hours. So only when sickos like you and me would be watching Arthur on television. But, counter to this, the First United Methodist Church of Alabama hosted a wedding party and screening of the episode in June 2019 as a counter to the Alabama Public Television decision. This was, of course, part of the news cycle that was created from, as we've said many times, Gay Rat Wedding, which has become the meme surrounding this episode. I think the well-natured meme, but it was also a way to get eyes back on a show that people hadn't thought about probably since they were kids, of hey, turns out Mr. Ratburn is gay and got married.
Gay Rat Wedding, I think of it more as a mantra. Because aren't we all having our gay rat wedding, Will, every day? In a sense, we're all kind of having a gay rat wedding. For all the ways that could be in whatever it means.
What do you mean? Lucas, how are you having your gay rat wedding?
Well, right now I got my windows down and I'm enjoying a nice Corona Light. It's Tuesday, the sun's out. I'm feeling good talking to my good friend Will. In a way, it's almost like a little bit of my gay rat wedding. I think it's gay. Having your gay rat wedding, it's just about living in the moment, Will. It's about living moss.
I don't know how I feel about the branding of Taco Bell being associated with Gay Rat Wedding, but I suppose it could be worse. Interesting that Gay Rat Wedding is a mindset as much as it is an event in history.
Well put.
Okay. Maybe I'll need some more examples from our listeners of how they are living their own gay rat wedding in their lives. A quote here from Maria Vera Whalen, who at the time was the Senior Director of Marketing, Communications, and Social Media, Children's Media and Education for PBS. She is now the Vice President of Marketing and Brand Engagement. Quote, We believe it is important to represent the wide array of adults in the lives of children who look to PBS Kids every day, end quote. And finally, a quote from the man himself, Mark Brown. Quote, I'm sure I'm not any different than millions of other families around the world that have people that we love who are gay, who are young families raising children. And it makes me very sad that these young families are not really well represented or hardly represented at all in our media. And I don't think that's a good thing. A parent has an opportunity to watch television with their kids and explain things and expand the story that they're watching together and share their values. That's, I think, one of the beauties of television. You know, art reflects life and life reflects art, and I think kids need to see what's happening in the world. I would hate to live in a world which is sanitized and censored, and that's really something I can't get behind. I mean, how do you think Lucas and I are going to feel about this? It's like, if you've been with us from the beginning, maybe if this is your first episode, but like, just to be clear, I agree with Mark Brown, and I think that the controversy around this, while predictable, was also very silly. And this was, well, okay, I don't want to get into how the episode did what it did. We'll talk about that later. But I think just in terms of the controversy around it, like I said, we've come so far since 2005 when an episode of Postcards from Buster could get totally axed for just having gay people on it. But in many ways, we still have a little bit further to go because this was a little bit of a lightning rod for a while. I remember there was when we were first starting out on Twitter, there was a Twitter account that was all about trying to get this episode played in Alabama and Arkansas. And it's, as much as the response from Alabama and Arkansas was steeped in politeness, let's say, conservatively, I would just say that I think that their reasoning for doing so was wrong-headed and it didn't seem honest to me as to why to not air this episode. Oh, because children may see it without their parents, or young children might see it. Yeah? And?
Yeah, I mean, there's, and especially in watching it, with the exception of the portrayal of two guys getting married, there really isn't an ideology put forward by this episode.
No.
So that whole Alabama thing, it's funny because I remember that being a part of the discourse growing up. You know, people are trying to get Harry Potter books banned. That really used to be kind of more commonplace. And we have read stories about that still being commonplace in places like Florida and things like, you know, I don't want to open up too big of a can of worms, but there's things like critical race theory that people are always trying to ban books on behalf in service of trying to kind of take that out of schools and stuff like that. But this one seemed like a pretty open and shut case of like, is anybody really that mad about the gay rat wedding? Really? And it almost seemed kind of silly that this was even newsworthy at all when it first happened. I was like, oh, Mr. Ratburn's getting married to a man. I'm surprised that this is as notable as it is. So I suppose, in retrospect, it definitely was needed because it was so notable, right? And I think it has been a step forward now where I think if the gay rat wedding was happening in 2024, we probably wouldn't see the same hullabaloo as we saw in 2019 even. So it shows that these things progress, you know, at a rate. There's a big difference between the response in the early 2000s and in 2019, and there's probably would be a big difference now.
I certainly hope so. And I hope that the more that we go on, the more outdated the response to even this episode seems. As Marco themselves said in the email, we continue to have so many different experiences represented on TV and in movies and all kinds of different media, and this is good. We need more of this so that it's more normalized, because it is normal. Like, it's so normal. In fact, that's the thing about this episode, is that it's a totally normal episode. It just happens to have one unexpected but also normal thing happen in it. So let's talk about the actual episode itself. It starts off with Mr. Ratburn. He's answering a phone call from somebody named Patty while class is going on. And This is, I mean, very unusual for Mr. Ratburn to answer a cell phone in class. In fact, I think he's confiscated cell phones from the students before. And he reveals that they were talking about a wedding. In fact, it's his wedding. We just don't know who it's to at this point. As the kids are talking about this at the Sugar Bowl, Muffy says, teachers don't get married. It's just wrong. It is. I enjoyed returning to this whole thing of like viewing teachers as aliens or like just otherworldly creatures like Arthur and the real Mr. Ratburn.
We have a lot of really funny jokes kind of in quick succession here in this kind of opening segment. You know, they're talking about, this kind of, teachers are this otherworldly type of creature. They're not human. Buster has a really funny line about when they go home, they just sharpen pencils, eat kale, and think of homework assignments, which, by the way, I like kale, so perhaps I'd fall into Buster's stereotyping there.
Well, it's funny that, like, this was kind of during the cultural moment that kale was having, yeah? Like, it feels like 5 years ago, kale became the new broccoli, like the go-to vegetable that was like, adults love it and kids hate it, you know?
That's a good point. I'll also mention that we actually get a line from the dream version of Mr. Ratburn, who's this kind of evil teacher who just thinks of assignments, and the assignment he thinks up is a 4,000-word essay on the color gray. This was really funny, this opening sequence of all the kids kind of pontificating about the true lives of teachers.
Right, and how this is a completely unthinkable thing for Mr. Ratburn, of all people, to be getting married. Buster also says that when they're not doing those things that you mentioned, they don't even sleep. They go into low power mode and watch documentaries, which is like, that's not just teachers, Buster. That's adults. That's adults in 2019.
Oh, yeah. I love going into low power mode and throwing on a Ken Burns.
Yeah. Or even just, I guess I might extend that to like a long form video, because last night I definitely went into low power mode and watched Metal Gear Scanlan for an hour and a half. I wouldn't call that a documentary, but I mean, if you think about it, it kind of is, I suppose.
I would call it Kino. That's for sure.
Hell yeah! This is where the kids meet they see the person that Mr. Ratburn was on the phone with, Patty, who is also a rat. Lucas, I think you're better at describing the images than I am. Can you tell me, give me your description of what Patty looks like?
Well, Patty is played by Jane Lynch as a special guest star, and they have done the thing where they kind of model it after Jane Lynch. I don't think I could picture Jane Lynch wearing hoop earrings. But besides that, like kind of the pantsuit and the hairstyle, it's as if you kind of gave Jane Lynch's hairstyle to Mr. Ratburn, basically.
Sure. And then also wearing like, not business casual, but like a
pantsuit, a power suit.
Power suit. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah, like you say, Patty voiced by comedic actor Jane Lynch. You're probably familiar with her stuff from Glee. She was Sue Sylvester. She's been in a bunch of other movies and stuff like that. You know, I'm going to create a rat wedding that is so gay. That meme and everything. So the kids meet Patty. They assume that she is marrying Mr. Ratburn, and they're afraid that because Patty is this very direct, forthright person who wants things to be just so. We see them sit down at the sugar bowl, and she wants her toast to be toasted at just this amount of crispness. She needs her tea to be steeped for 3 minutes, not 2.5, or else it's useless. Very, very particular. They're afraid that Patty is going to toughen up Mr. Ratburn to an unreasonable degree. You know, Mr. Ratburn is already a very tough teacher, but Arthur has this imagination where Mr. Ratburn gets so upset about a misplaced comma that he literally hulks out. I mean, like, he gets green and muscly and huge and goes into Hulk rage.
Yes, he says, bad grammar make Ratburn angry. Ratburn give even more homework.
And this is Arthur Holden. Arthur Holden gets to do some really fun stuff as Ratburn, and this is like him doing his best Hulk voice, which still sounds very proper in terms of, like, you know, a typical Hulk voice is very like mindless and angry, and his is like, it's him trying to do it in the Ratburn voice. This kind of reminded me, we've talked many times about how these newer episodes sometimes do a little bit of a remix of the older ones. I don't think this is a remix of this, but it reminded me of the episode where Mr. Ratburn gets a substitute teacher, and they're afraid that they'll be even tougher than Mr. Ratburn. Mr. Ratburn's sister, Ms. Ratburn. So a little bit reminiscent of that. And this is where Muffy also introduces the idea of the app Hippie Morph, which also feels dated in a funny way, in that this wasn't a long time ago. But around 2018-ish, I feel like there were a lot more like single-use apps, you know what I mean? Like to make funny pictures out of, or...
Yeah, the I drink, and it's like you drink a beer. I was, this little joke, at first, Will, I was a little bit annoyed. I thought it was reminiscent of, oh, Bart's got a smartphone, like on The Simpsons, how it's a little bit too contemporary in a way that doesn't feel true to the writing of the show. However, there's a way that this hippie morph joke, this gag, comes back around at the end of the episode that I was like, never mind, I take it back, they earned it.
Okay, we will get there. We will get there soon. Yeah, so hippie morph turns a picture of somebody into their hippie version, and so they're cooking up a plan to stop this wedding before it even starts. So Arthur and Buster, they get Mr. Ratburn to record his voice. They get him under the guise of recording an audiobook of something, while they get a picture of Mr. Ratburn, and Francine dons a detective sort of hat and dark raincoat and drops Patty a flash drive with Mr. Ratburn in the hippie app morph, and they're thinking that if she sees this footage of Ratburn as a hippie, then she'll totally will drop him immediately and will be disgusted and will call the wedding off. But actually she thinks it's hilarious, and that doesn't work. So their next idea is that they want to match Mr. Ratburn up with somebody who seems like she would be his perfect match, Miss Turner, the librarian. So to do that, they visit a place that we've never been before, first time. It's a place called Patrick's Chocolate, and we meet Patrick himself. Why is this important? We'll find out very soon. But Patrick is, I think he is also an aardvark, at least judging from the way that his face is shaped, as well as his Arthur-esque ears. And he owns this chocolate shop, and he seems to be very dedicated to it. In fact, he introduces them to a chocolate he's created that's called the Frida Kahlo, because it is semi-dark organic Mexican chocolate with hazelnut-flavored caramel and a hint of orange zest.
Patrick, he gives us like Hallmark Christmas movie guy vibes.
Ooh, yes.
Like, in the Hallmark Christmas movie, big city gal, she doesn't have enough time for her personal life. She's so focused on work, comes home for Christmas, and then she meets a guy who works in the artisanal chocolate shop, and she realizes, maybe there's more to life than just work. And how the guy is kind of an empty vessel, just kind of affable and folksy. That's our buddy Patrick here.
Yeah, nothing bad to say about Patrick. Nothing really. He seems nice and interested in chocolates, and that's all we get sort of forever. As Marco's email said, Patrick does show up maybe once or twice more. Like, he's listed here. By the way, his actor's name is Marcel Jeanin, Canadian actor. Apologies on the pronunciation. Who has been on Arthur before. Has actually is the voice of Buster's dad from season 8, many seasons ago. But he's listed as Patrick twice. This is the only mainline episode he's in. And then he's in an Arthur Thanksgiving, which is one of the specials we covered. If you'd like our commentary on that, that's on our YouTube and our podcast feed. But yeah, this scene right here is basically all we get of Patrick. And as Marco said in their email, and as we've said many times, that kind of sucks. That's too bad. I remember when this came out, I was like, oh, I hope they have more episodes with the two of them as a married couple. And they don't. I mean, they like an Arthur Thanksgiving, sure, that's like an hour, but I don't think that they're like huge in that special, if I remember correctly. It's not really about them. Anyway, while this is going on, this is a a way big callback to an episode from many, many seasons ago. He's reading love poems by the poet Pablo Neruda, which is they're not the first mention on Arthur of Pablo Neruda. In that episode where Binky was learning how to rhyme and write a poem, that's how I first found out who Pablo Neruda was. Ratburn asks the kids to return the book, and they slip in a phony love note. I loved this. Again, this is Arthur Holden getting to have a little fun with the Ratburn voice, because they make this phony love poem, seemingly from Mr. Ratburn to Miss Turner, but it's also written like an 8-year-old. So there's a fair amount of spelling mistakes, and it's also just not very good. So it's just but it's in when Miss Turner reads it. It's in Mr. Ratburn's voice. So it starts out, "Dear Padge Tuner." And then all of these other spelling mistakes are said in the Mr. Ratburn voice. I thought this was great. I thought it was really funny.
Yeah, I thought it was funny too. And did you notice the bit where obviously Miss Turner sees through the ruse because it's such a badly written poem that she kind of actually does like corrections on it, gets out the red pen, circles the errors, but she also hands them a copy of Poem Writing for Dummies. And if you pause it, it's a pretty funny kind of parody of the For Dummies format of books, with a drawing of what looks like Buster or some sort of rabbit in kind of the For Dummies style that I thought was a funny screen cap.
Oh, actually, I didn't look at it that closely. I should. I'm going to do that in just a second here. But that didn't work either. Miss Turner sees through the ruse, and of course Mr. Ratburn was none the wiser as to what was going on. So their only idea left is that there's, of course, a part in the wedding ceremony where you can speak now or forever hold your peace and object at the appropriate time. So the kids get all set up to do this. This is, by the way, Arthur, Buster, Francine, and Muffy. And they are all ready to do this at the appropriate time. They've even rehearsed exactly what they're going to say. But they get to the wedding, and they can't do it. They just chicken out because the focus is on them, and they just can't do it. Appropriate time to mention, I suppose, that the kids of Ratburn's class are all invited with their families to the wedding. Because, as Patty says, Nigel Ratburn considers them family, which is, I think in real life it might be a little strange depending on like how old the kids are, but because this is Arthur and we've been with them for 22 seasons, I thought that was nice. I thought it was cute.
It is a little strange that, the grade 3 class is invited to the wedding. This is one of those things where it works in the logic of the show, but it would never happen in real life.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, no.
Yeah. Like in the logic of the show, it's like, oh, this is so nice, They're such a big part of Mr. Ratburn's life. He wants to, but like in real life, there's just no universe where this takes place. Especially the grade 3 class is invited to a wedding and they have no idea who the other groom is.
Right, and I guess it didn't say on the invitation, which as the one of the two of us who is married, you know well in advance who this is going to be. There's not a. It's wedding season, Will. I just got like 2 wedding invitations, and the conceit that you would not know who's involved in the wedding, it's a little far-fetched, may I say. Yeah, and. The other thing is that when I saw this and I was like, oh, that's nice, he invited all the kids, I was also like thinking about it as somebody who I have not planned a wedding myself, but I've been assistant to somebody planning a wedding and being like, that's a lot of money. Like to invite that many people is just like, ugh, that's okay. They must be saving money somewhere else, because Patrick is a chocolatier, a small business owner, and Ratburn's a teacher, so they don't have all the money in the world. Anyway, they must be, maybe they're saving on, like, maybe they had like a non-traditional dinner, or what else could they save money? Maybe they didn't have like a wedding party or something. I don't know.
They're definitely not having a non-traditional dinner, because I'm watching them all eat right now, and I remember what they were talking about, the caterer giving them salmon.
Right, yes.
I'm thinking they're just not worried about spending money. I think, perhaps Patrick is independently wealthy through his small business of his chocolate shop. That chocolate shop's doing gangbusters, it seems.
Could be, and also
because we know Mr. Ratburn's not paying for it on the teacher's salary.
No, sir. And I suppose it would also really help to be related to the wedding planner. This is the reveal. that Patty is not marrying Mr. Ratburn. She is Mr. Ratburn's sister, who is their wedding planner. It's her Mr. Ratburn's older sister, as a matter of fact. And we also, hey, speaking of Rodentia Ratburn, we get a cameo of her. She's sniffling in the front row because, it's all so beautiful. I remember the first time I saw this, and still this time I was like, that is such a deep cut that you didn't need, but I really appreciate that she was there. Arthur's substitute teacher trouble. Again, season 1 episode. If you're a kid watching Arthur for the first time, you don't know who this is, but I know who it is, and I really appreciated that. And this is where we get the big reveal. Walking down the aisle, it's Mr. Ratburn and his fiancée, now his husband, Patrick. Patrick gives the kids a little wink, and this is all it is. Mr. Ratburn and Patrick walk down the aisle, arm in arm. Patrick gives the kids a wink, and the kids smile at each other, and that's it. Like, we get a final scene of them having dinner. They're having the best cake they've ever eaten, and they say that there's one thing that teachers should never do, and that's dance. And we see the animation of Patrick and Mr. Ratburn dancing, not amazing, but it's also meant to be goofy, so whatever. And it's just not it's not an issue. This isn't an episode where we're trying to say something. It's just two guys getting married, and it's fine. It's treated like normal, as it should be.
One thing, and forgive me if you mentioned this, Will, and I missed it.
Yeah, it's all right.
Did we mention how Buster shows up to the wedding dressed like his hippie persona? So he was so impressed with his hippie morph version of himself he saw on the phone that he was like, I think this is going to be my new look. And so he shows up to the wedding dressed in kind of late 60s, early 70s hippie regalia. And I thought, okay, they've come full circle on that joke. They've earned it.
Thank you for mentioning that. And it's just, it was funny. It was funny to see. I remember like halfway through the scene, I kind of clocked it. And I was like, oh, huh. And Buster just hard launching this look at a wedding. The bold move, but I guess it turned out okay for him. And now, a word from us kids. This is London and her class, and they are writing letters. Okay, this relates very, very closely to the episode that we just talked about, which is sometimes a bit of a problem with these segments. I might even say it relates a bit too much because So London and her class, their teacher, whose name is Miss Vallow, I believe it is, also got married to a man named Patrick. So the kids are writing letters to Patrick so that he can get to know them, and then later on, Patrick comes to the class and gets to meet them. So my first thought was, this is a day of class? Like, this is at least the morning of class. And it's just like, are we going to learn something today? Or is this just about Patrick?
Couple of things we got to get into here. First of all, where the hell did they find someone who just recently married a guy named Patrick?
A teacher.
Okay, a teacher, no less. This has to have been like a friend of one of the writers, and that's why they named the character Patrick. Is so that they might have filmed this first,
right,
and then put the episode together. Second of all, I'm sorry, guys. I know teachers listen to the show. Teachers really do be talking about their personal lives a little bit too much. Who cares? You got married. You're going to make all the kids write to your fiancé? What the hell is this?
Well, okay.
They're all talking about how much they like Patrick. They don't know Patrick from Adam, okay? And then Patrick's got to come in on his day off and then rub elbows with all these kids? How did he get the day pass to get into the elementary school? He's got to get the day pass to go through security. Usually, is Patrick going through a criminal records check to meet all these children? Okay, and then third off, okay, Patrick, I hate to say it, is the most generic NPC guy I have ever seen in my life. This guy is the NPC. This is the default skin when you start up Fortnite. This is Patrick. is like, what is he talking to the kids? He's talking about he was playing sports in college or something.
Well, and he also says that he himself is a teacher. That's why he's like,
right.
He's a very nice looking guy, and he's good at talking with the kids because he works with kids as well. So, but yeah, to your point, like, I guess he had to take the day off from his teaching job for this or something. I don't know.
This is the most aggressively normal man I've ever seen. I don't know if he needs a different haircut or something, but he's got to switch up his swag. When he said he was 27, it's not like he looks old.
No.
But his swag is not 27.
No.
And I know he probably keeps it professional and buttoned up, but it doesn't mean you have to be like, I don't know, man. This Patrick, he's like so normal, it's almost freakish.
He's around your age too. So like this is almost your contemporary.
He's actually younger than he's a little bit younger.
Yeah, he's like
me.
your contemporary.
He goes all the way around where it's like he's so aggressively normal. I'm like, Patrick, you got to get like a dangly earring or something. Like, you got to switch this up because he's kind of freaking me out with how normal he is.
It's a little too normal. Now, I want to just push back a little bit. I know what you're saying. I do think that the idea of if you're a teacher, it's hard for me to be like, I'm related to a teacher, but I am not a teacher myself. And I am aware of the fact that sometimes, especially when you're working in like primary education, stuff like that, you have a class of kids and you really bond with them and you really like them. I do think it's cute to do the thing of like having your significant other meet your class. You don't have to meet them like directly, but just even being like, tell this person who's important to me about you, who are also important to me. I like that aspect of it, but maybe not during like class time. Like maybe do that as like a homework assignment or something. Thank you also for pointing out Patrick's age, because I've been banging on about this for years about how the teachers on A Word From Us kids keep getting younger and I stay the same age. And now it's like Patrick is 27, which means that Miss Vallow is probably around that age too. And it's like, great, cool. I'm older than the teachers on the Arthur segment. We've confirmed it now. It's locked in. It was certainly a surprising Word From Us kids, and I think that's preferable to just like nice but boring that we get sometimes.
Hi, everybody. It's Lucas, your favorite co-host from Elwood City Limits. I want to remind you folks that if you like listening to the podcast, first and foremost, the best way to spread the love is to tell a friend who is interested in Arthur or podcasts or animation or hearing about Nova Scotia for some reason. But there's some other things you could do as well. For instance, you can follow us on social media. Twitter is @ECL Podcast. The Instagram is @Elwood City Limits. My pet project, the Twitch channel, which we do live streams on sometimes, twitch.tv/Elwood City Limits Pod. And we also have a Facebook and Tumblr as well. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and youtube.com/Elwood City Limits. That's where Will has been diligently uploading all of the episodes if they're not on your podcast listening service of choice. If they aren't on one of those services, let us know. You can reach out to us on social media or via email at elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. Finally, the Patreon is where you can find all of our paywall content, patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. This gives you access to the Discord, where we have a bustling community, as well as some exclusive videos, audio bonuses, such as commentary for the various Arthur movies and more, as well as some of our additional podcasts. For the kids is where me and Will cover all the PBS shows that aren't Arthur, as well as ECL Origins, where we really talk about any show from our childhood that we want. And most importantly, you get early access to every episode of ECL. You get to flex on your friends that you're getting it a week early. You can join for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. And now, back to the show.
And then we got to follow this episode up. There's like another story after this, and it's called The Feud, about how people can argue about anything. It could be Arthur and DW arguing about the music in the blue cheese versus ranch dressing on salad. And then eventually, you might even get to the point where you don't even remember or care what the argument was about in the first place. And Arthur imagines this argument with DW going on into the future when they're both very old and they have their own stylized droids that look like them, like child versions of them, and the droids have their own color schemes as well.
Yeah, and Arthur claims even his droid thinks that the dressing is gross.
I liked the design of the DW droid. I actually thought that looked pretty cool.
It's always fun when they go to the far-flung future.
If I was going to be a VTuber, I think I'd want the DW droid to be my, like, avatar. I'm not going to be a VTuber, but that would still be pretty cool. This episode is the one where we get all 3 new voice actors doing lines. And I just, like, I mean this as a compliment. I actually forgot that they got new voices for Arthur and DW. They sounded normal right away. And that's the thing about a lot of these newer seasons when they replace some of the voices, and I'm just like, yeah, that sounds like Arthur, sounds like DW. They would have to be like way, way different for me to notice, but they fill the role pretty well to the fact that I just forgot they were new voice actors.
Yeah, I concur. I think that I noticed probably the animation more than I noticed the vocal performances, right? The vocal performances kind of slotted in perfectly. Animation with both of these episodes, there was a noticeable, I guess, it seems harsh, but I would call a regression in terms of the animation quality. I would say that this is, you know, when we first started in the Flash era and I was talking about that kind of paper doll effect where you could see that there's a model and they use motion tweens to move the model around. Yeah. I was really noticing it here, and I had gotten acclimated to the kind of digital era of Arthur, and I feel like, I don't know if they changed their process or you know, obviously, the more we've looked into animation, it's often outside of the animator's control and budgetary reasons why things look the way they look. They want them to look as good as possible, but I was not liking the look of either of these episodes, and I noticed it even more in the feud.
There were a couple parts here and there that stood out to me. It's when they had to do motion, especially like the scene where they first meet Patrick. The way they had Patrick move around looked strange to me in a way that's hard for me to communicate. But it was like he was almost moving a bit too much, and it looked abnormal for just the kind of static scene that they were going for. Anyway, I kind of get what you're saying, but otherwise I wasn't super duper let down in any way. So this episode is about how Arthur and Buster, they get into a fight about a video game they were playing, because it's a Dark Bunny racing game where Buster is playing Dark Bunny, Arthur is playing a character called Dr. Aardvarkian, and they're sailing on like these jet cycle sort of things. The game freezes. Buster blames Arthur for jostling the console, and then Buster turns the TV off, and Arthur claims that it's Buster did it because he was losing or something to that effect. So they get in a big fight about this, and they stay mad long after this. In fact, they're so mad that each of them complains to Arthur complains to Muffy, and Buster complains to Francine, and they get their sides of the story and each take their respective side. Before too long, the kids are divided into Team Arthur and Team Buster, literally calling themselves that. So Team Arthur, how's this? Who you got, Lucas? We got Team Arthur, who is Arthur, Muffy, Fern, and LaDonna, and Team Buster, which is Buster, Francine, Sue Ellen, and Brain.
So I gotta stick. You gotta stay loyal. Stick with your day one. Stick with your OGs. So in terms of, you know, the makeup of the teams, I'm going Team Buster all day. In terms of who I actually perceive as in the wrong in the dispute itself, I'm kind of Team Arthur on this one.
I agree with you on that. Arthur seemed more in the right there. Picking a team, I suppose I would give the edge to Team.
You're gonna hang out with LaDonna?
Yeah, that's good. It's funny actually that on both teams we have like the one character that neither of us like all that much. It's LaDonna and Brain. And then we have, like, our favorites. So, like, I like Arthur. You like Buster. We both like Fern. We both like Sue Ellen. I think we've both come to like Muffy and Francine, so it's not easy on its face. Team Arthur and Team Buster, they're so against each other. They're sitting on the opposite ends of the cafeteria. They create a barricade line in the snow, dividing them. And the potential tipping point is Binky. Binky, who is absent the day that this is happening. So he comes back, and they're already divided into teams. So he doesn't have any stake in this. He flips a coin, but it doesn't land flat. It leans against one of the lunchboxes. So he just creates Team Binky, and he just kind of thinks all this fighting is a bit silly. Binky even goes so far as to imagine that Buster as Dark Bunny and Arthur as Dr. Aardvarkian are fighting in the style of the Dark Bunny cartoon, while a creature called the Lob Monster is attacking the city, and it's a giant kaiju lobster. When I say fighting in the style of the cartoon, it looks like Batman the Animated Series, but they do the classic 60s Batman biff, pow, bam, when the various characters are getting into it with their Dark Bunny character designs.
This is, again, another example of where I was like, usually these imagination sequences are a great place for them to switch up the art style, kind of, and they do kind of use Dutch angles, and the background is very much in the style of Batman the Animated Series. But the actual animation itself, again, not my cup of tea, especially with the big kind of 60s Batman stuff. It was almost... I remember when I was watching the anime Attack on Titan in the first season, one of the big kind of detractions that people would say about that show is that it's a PowerPoint. There's a lack of animation period. And they are kind of doing that here where it's like a freeze frame with the word bubble popping up. And I don't know, it just kind of looks bad.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Because they don't want to show violence on the show.
True.
So it has to be obscured. But the way that they're moving around is a little strange too. So this continues, even though the next day, Arthur and Buster end up working together because the snow barricade has come down. So they work to fix it, and then they just end up being friendly again. They end up talking about the video game, and seemingly the fence is mended, as can happen with kids that age. But the teams are still very much against each other, and they get after Arthur and Buster for being friendly with each other. So now they want to stop this, Arthur and Buster do, and they enlist Binky's help. The one thing I wanted to note here is that Buster forgot his lunch, so Arthur gives him half of a big sandwich that his dad gave him, grilled vegetable with goat cheese. That sounds good.
Yeah, sounds yummy.
So Arthur, Buster, and Binky, their plan to get the teams back together because they're still at each other's throats. They concoct this phony snow fort building contest because both teams have made adjacent snow forts, and that's what the barricade is for, to keep them apart from one another. So if they create the snow fort building contest, they think it will be an opportunity to get the teams to work together to create one big one. But instead, they just start beefing up their own individual forts, and eventually, through misunderstanding, they wreck each other's forts instead. They do eventually get Buster and Arthur convince them to combine their forts together, even though they are in disagreement with each other, but they eventually find out that the contest was a fake, which is funny when Brain takes a closer look and he says about the poster, Mayor is spelled incorrectly, and there's a doodle of a wrestler in the corner. And Binky says, I'm getting good at drawing wrestlers.
This was another example of the show outsmarted me.
Ooh.
I was like, no way the mayor's going around town judging every snow castle. And then I was like, oh, it was a ruse, and I fell for it.
In fact, you're right. He certainly was not. And this allows everybody to finally make friends again. Nobody's mad at each other. In fact, we get a wipe, because this was in the winter. And we get a wipe to what's either spring or summer, and Arthur and Buster return to where the forts were. And there's a bit of an epilogue here, which is not common for the end of an Arthur episode, where they're remembering the argument after the winter is over, and they don't even really remember what the argument was about in the first place. So all's well that ends well, seemingly. That's the end of that one, and we are well and truly into season 22, the shortest Arthur season yet. Okay, so we've talked about it culturally. We've given you the blow-by-blow. Let's talk about what we think about Mr. Ratburn and the Special Someone. Lucas, you finally got to watch this. famous, popular, controversial episode. What did you think of it as an episode of Arthur?
Yeah, I think that I really do agree with the listener that wrote in. This is an episode that, because it ended up causing such of a buzz surrounding it, it would have maybe been better suited as a full half-hour episode as opposed to 1.5 hour, because Patrick really is a non-character. And I will say that it is kind of strange that the main plot device of this episode is that the kids think Mr. Ratburn is marrying someone who's not his husband, and then the fact that Mr. Ratburn is having a gay rat wedding is kind of the, like, bait and switch at the end. It's the, like, it's like, oh, it's a twist, he's gay, and he's having a wedding. Which, given the conversations that we're having around that episode, kind of weird, right? Like, it's like, oh, I bet you didn't expect him to be gay at this wedding. Which obviously I did, because it was a news story before I saw the episode, right?
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of the kind of narrative drive out of it. I'm like, well, he's getting married to the guy and the kids don't know. So it's one of those episodes where you know more than the characters in it, and it just kind of gets frustrating. And I think it's worsened because Patrick is kind of such a lame duck character. However, you could tell that this was an episode where they knew there was going to be a lot of eyeballs on it. They knew it was going to cause a buzz, because there is a lot of clever writing in this episode. It's really, really funny. Probably the funniest Arthur episode I've seen in a while, which is not something I was expect, because sometimes the more serious episodes are not necessarily the more funny ones. But I think they could tell that this episode would have a lot of eyes on it, and so there was, a lot of craft put into the kind of writing. And it's a really, when you think of it as an episode of a sitcom or something like that, one of the funnier kind of modern Arthur episodes. I was really chuckling quite a bit in the first half. And so, kind of outside its social importance, I think it's a pretty easy watch. And so I would come away saying I really enjoyed Mr. Ratburn in this special somewhat. I have my qualms with it. It's odd. It's more odd than I expected it to be. But it's a very funny episode of Arthur and enjoyable as a result.
Well, and to your point about it, and Marco's point about it being only just half of an Arthur episode, it feels so stuffed with, like, ideas and jokes and, like, stuff occurring and, like, fantasy ideas and dream sequences and stuff like that. It really, I completely agree with you. I wish this was a full 20-minute episode. And it's odd that, like, just looking at the episodes we have left, there are only 2 more of those double episodes. There's one next season, and there's one the season after that, and then we don't do them anymore. And maybe that has to do with the whole schedule of creating the 1-hour specials, but you almost wish that Mr. Ratburn and the Special Someone was an hour-long special. Yeah. But for the time that they had, other than, Patrick, I think that they used it pretty well. It was diverting the kids and trying to bring it to their level in terms of how they understand it. And it does show that they care about Mr. Ratburn, and Mr. Ratburn cares about them. And I think that's very nice. Jane Lynch, I think, is not hilarious or anything, but I thought she did pretty well. It was a good add to this episode, especially considering that it is, the gay rat wedding episode. But yeah, as you have said, and Marco has said, and many people have said, just kind of wish Patrick was more of a character, and we will really never get to see him again unless we watch that hour-long special again. And that's all right. Like, I'm good. Like, I saw it. Yeah. So, like, on a macro level, I think that it's as we've said, it's funny that the controversy was all about this very benign episode, and otherwise, it's a good episode of this season. And yeah, Mr. Ratburn gets married. There's a little bit of a change to the status quo. And yeah, it's a pleasant, funny, good episode. I also feel bad because if this was the full episode itself, then another story wouldn't have to follow it. And the feud, poor the feud. I feel like after watching Mr. Ratburn, the Special Someone, like, I was good. And it's like, oh, there's another half of the episode to watch. And, like, the feud is fine. Like, I think it's fun and everything. There's some funny ideas. I liked some of the visual humor, and they really played around with the dark bunny aesthetic there a little bit more. But I also kind of don't really feel very much about it either. It just came and went, and I don't really have that much to say about it, honestly. It's fine. It might have done better if maybe this were the first one and Mr. Ratburn and the Special Someone was the second story. I don't know. It's fine.
I liked the feud. Okay. I don't know. I was into it. Again, this season thus far. I mean, we're one episode in, so I don't want to make any kind of sweeping proclamations. But here it goes. These 2 episodes, the writing is the strong suit. I thought the feud was a fun concept. I liked the idea of kind of a house divided. Buster and Arthur squash the beef, but everybody else is still fighting to the point where they don't know what they're fighting over anymore. And I thought a lot of the comedy was strong. I like the way it wraps up. I like the concept of 2 dueling snow forts. I don't know about you, Will, but I have a lot of nostalgia for battling another group of kids with trying to make the better snow fort at recess time. Right. And you'd go over to their snow fort and knock it over. And so this was, I was nostalgic. My criticism is I really just don't like the look of this episode, especially the Dark Buddy portion. This is kind of everything I was maligning about the modern look of Arthur. And so I'm just not looking forward to more episodes that look like this, but I would rather, if I had to pick one or the other, the writing gets really bad or the art gets worse, I'm going to pick the writing because it just makes a better show. So I didn't mind it. I actually enjoyed the feud.
All right. Well, I'm glad that you did. Now, that's the thing about these shorter seasons is that there's not a whole lot of wiggle room in terms of creating a top 3 or having episodes impress you. It's like before you know it, we're going to be finished. And that's what we're going to do as we roll on here. Thanks a lot for joining us for this Season 22 premiere episode as Elwood City Limits. We've covered one of the biggest Arthur episodes probably in the show's history, and we've still got some big ones along the way. So stick with us as we roll past the final 4 seasons of Arthur. And of course, patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. Don't forget, we are going to be soon recording the episode of For the Kids that's all about Bear in the Big Blue House. And as I said at the top, I've never seen it before. I'm not familiar with it, and I'm eager to find out what everybody's been talking about for all these years about what makes Bear in the Big Blue House so well remembered. And next time on Elwood City Limits itself, we're going to be continuing on into Season 22 with the stories When Rivals Came to Roost and The Longest 11 Minutes. So, what will Season 2 have in store for us? Is it going to amaze with every episode? Is there a potential for disappointment? I mean, no dog and baby episodes, so we're on the right track. We'll have to see if shorter means better as Arthur and Elwood City Limits continues on. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and we hope that you are having your own gay rat wedding this week, whatever that means to you. My name's Will Young, and for Lucas Mancini,
they all think Arthur won, erroneously, I may add.
We'll see you next time.